Hi, students. Welcome to Social Problems for the fall semester 2012. Again, my name is Nadie DuBose, and I am so excited to be able to share with you information this semester related to social problems. This is Lecture 1, and the title of the chapter is Thinking About Social Problems. And so I took an opportunity to review your blogs from last week. I thought that they were written very well. I was very pleased with the information that was relayed in the blogs. I believe that you all have a wealth of knowledge and experiences that you'll be able to bring to the table this semester, and I believe that we're in for a great time over the next 16 weeks. I'm hoping to be able to lift certain things from the textbook and to be able to expound on certain topics that will allow you to think about various social problems in a different light. And so the lecture this week will allow us to look at several different things related to perception and perspective, as well as theories and understanding how theories help us to gain a more broader understanding about how to analyze and critically examine social problems. In addition, we're going to look at the stages of social problems, and we'll also take a look at what happens in those stages. And hopefully, you will be able to bridge what you're hearing in this particular audio lecture with some of the information that you've read in the textbook. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, give me a call. I'm definitely here to assist you and to support you throughout these 16 weeks. I'm very excited to be working with each of you. I think it's just great that several of you have law enforcement backgrounds, and so you're able to bring some things to the table that some of us that have not worked in that field have not had an opportunity to experience. And so some of you that are have just finished your bachelor's degrees and you're going on for the master's degree, I think that is just phenomenal. And I believe that the things that you've learned, the experiences that you've had, will actually help us to be able to gain perspective from each other. So again, I'm so delighted to be able to share information with you this semester as it relates to learning about social problems. Hopefully, we will be able to grow and learn together. And again, I just welcome questions. I welcome comments. If there's anything that you're uncertain about, by all means, as I stated, contact me because I'm definitely here to help you. So, again, that's my spiel, that's my intro. I guess I should tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a three-time alum of the University of Missouri. I'm a native of St. Louis. My bachelor's degree is in human development and family studies. My master's degree is in social work, and my PhD is in rural sociology with an emphasis in community development. And so I've worked for the state of Missouri in the Department of Health and Senior Services. I've worked at the University of Missouri. I've taught there on the campus at Lincoln. I've worked in social services. I worked at the Voluntary Action Center here in Columbia for a certain amount of time, and then also I've had an opportunity to work as a preschool teacher right after I finished my bachelor's degree. So I've had an opportunity to have some experiences that I think that I can share with you in certain aspects that may help you to see things in a different vein. And so again, I'm excited, and I hope we can actually come together this semester and create meaning in the things that we learn together. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later. So, again, let's jump into this lecture. This lecture has a PowerPoint. So please take a look at the PowerPoint as you're listening to the audio. It will help things make more sense to you. And again, if there's anything that is unclear, please let me know. If I were to start this lecture, so I hope you're looking at the PowerPoint as I would begin. Uh, if you take a look at slide number 2, that's where we're going to start. And you're seeing a picture here, and I would want you to take a few seconds and sort of take a look at what do you see, and some of you, after you take a look at it for a moment, you may see two different things here. But I'm hoping that you are able to allow your senses to draw you in to what's really going on here. So take a few seconds here, look at this particular image, and try to decide what is it that you're actually looking at. Now, I'm sure most of you are saying, well, some of you may be saying, I've already seen this photo, or this may be your first time taking a look at it. But it is actually a picture of a young woman and an old woman. And so you may have to adjust your screen to see the young woman, and some of you may be able to see the older woman as you first took a look at the image. But this image represents how most of us may see social problems. We have several different perspectives, and we see things in totally different ways. And so, as we talk about what is the relationship between perception and perspective, if you take an opportunity to reflect on what is perception, what probably comes to your mind is what you see, or your awareness of the things around you through your senses. So, of course, we were taught, I'm sure, as kids, we've got five senses. And so they are touch, taste, smell, hear, see. Touch, taste, smell, hear, see. And so the five senses there. But with our five senses, we're able to make sense of the world. And if we were to continue to look back at that picture, based on our own perspective, which is our viewpoint about how we see the world, then we're able to gather and draw some emphasis about what that image really means to us. If you were to consider social problems, and I was really impressed with the things that were relayed in the blog this week, several of you noted that social problems are subjective. They are based on what is important to us. They stem from our morals, our values, our experiences, our belief systems. Several of you noted that based on the profession in which you work, you see social problems in a totally different light. And I just thought that was interesting, because our social problems, or the social problems that we're very passionate about, that we endeavor to actually do something about in terms of addressing it, becoming involved with a social movement to be able to initiate change, really depends on what we deem as that which is socially real to us, or what we socially construct as our reality. Now, what is interesting is that in our textbook, it talks about social construction. And that basically is a term that helps us to understand that our reality basically is created on, as I said, what is socially real to us, or the things that we're socially aware of, given our family background, given where we live, given where we work, given our peer groups and the persons that are in our professional circles or our friendship circles. There are certain things that are evident to us that cause us to be aware, and it causes us to want to move in such a direction that we say, wow, something really needs to be done about this particular condition or issue that's going on in the world around us. Now, what's interesting about social problems are many of you mentioned in your blogs that they can be harmful to our society or to our well-being, or they can be very threatening. But many of you also noted that social problems arise out of a concern that a select group of people have for a particular issue. Now, I noticed in the blogs last week, several of you mentioned that drug abuse was a problem. Some of you mentioned teen pregnancy was a problem. Some of you talked about how racial profiling is an issue. And then some of you also alluded to welfare being a social problem as well, and several other things that you noted. But what was a common thread and very evident to me was that many of you understood that in order for something to be considered a social problem, it had to have a negative impact on our society or the people that were in our community. Now, as I thought more about this and I reflected on what I read in the blogs, what was very apparent was that many of you were writing from the standpoint of what you saw in your profession, or what you had learned in several of your classes, or what you experienced in your professional circles or in your peer circles. And I thought that was very interesting because it allowed me to see that many of you are very connected in the work that you're doing, or in the community that you're in, or even in the relationships that you have on a professional and personal level, to be aware of certain things that our textbook would say is in disorganization within our society. And so I would definitely encourage you all to continually take a look at the things that are emerging in your everyday work, that you would deem or warrant as needing attention, because it is definitely a signal or a sign to let you know that this may be an issue that is worth bringing attention to on another level, in terms of you understanding how to become involved with a group and organization that would be able to address this specific condition. And so, what you will find as we progress into the semester is that there are certain movements that are occurring right now to address several social problems that you mentioned. And I encourage you to do some research to see if you're really passionate about an issue, and you know that you want uh, to transition into an area where you could lobby for an issue, or where you could really make an impact by coming involved with a professional organization that works to specifically garner concern and resources to alleviate this social condition. Then I definitely would say do your research. If this is something that we can talk about, because I believe that it may be that where you are, you would be a person that's in a position to play a significant role in being able to bring about a change for this condition in our society. So again, really start to pay attention to that, because I believe it is definitely going to tell you a little bit more about why you're working where you're working, and it's also going to tell you a little bit more about how your community sees this particular issue. And so were to as we move into the semester, we're going to dive a little bit more into understanding what needs to happen for a social problem to be addressed and receive attention, that something could be done about it. And so that sort of brings us into what our textbook refers to as Bloomers' stages of social problems. And he does sort of an analysis. In the first stage, he states that he calls it societal recognition. And in this stage, he says that the social problem is born, or I would say it's conceived. And what that would really mean to us today is that something has occurred that has brought an issue to the forefront that makes everyone's eyebrows blink and be raised to such a degree that we as a society, we as a nation, we as a community say, oh my goodness, someone's got to do something. And many times, what I've seen in the different sectors that I've worked in, it's always a small group of people. Now, if the issue becomes, uh, if it has impact beyond the community to a state level, then the government becomes involved, and you will start to see that the government and there are people that work to lobby to pass policies and laws that will be designed to create change so that the social problem that is on the table in a particular era begins to be heightened to such a degree that everyone is put on guard, and everyone is in a position, everyone in terms of those that are in a position to do something about the social problem are really in the forefront, waving a banner, if you will, saying, hey, this is something that we need to start to pay attention to in terms of our social institutions in our families. It could be in our school system, could be in our governmental system, could be in a religious system. So when you start to see social problems that are conceived and they start to receive support and attention from social institutions in society, then you can actually say that it is at a stage where it has received recognition and there is a great concern for it. So in other words, this is the stage where people say, I would use this term, they start to say, if we don't do something about this, things are not going to get better. That would be an example of a social problem being born or it being in a stage of societal recognition. Stage two, Bloomer talks about is social legitimization. And in this particular stage, he talks about how the problem achieves attention from others. And as I was stating, now from others, meaning that this problem is starting to receive attention from, let's say, I'll give you an example, the educational system. It's receiving attention in the school system. And I think one example that we could use, the issue of contraception being on the table and being distributed in schools, and sexual education being taught in the educational arena. That came out of the issue with adolescents engaging in sexual activities at such a young age. The issue was brought to the table years ago to say, okay, do we need to be talking about this in health education classes? Do we need to distribute condoms in the school system, because we have a high rate of teen pregnancy, we have a high rate of sexually transmitted diseases, and so maybe this is an issue that not only should receive attention from the educational system. This is an issue that the family should be paying attention to, and parents should be more involved in the types of friendships that their adolescents are establishing, the types of conversations that they're having, at the house. This is when you know that a social problem is now socially legitimate, because it's receiving attention from so many different sectors that it causes people to come to an agreement in such a way that now, in this stage, this social problem is a priority and it must be addressed. It's not only conceived, now it must be addressed. So now you see it move to that stage of social legitimization. Now, stage three says that with this particular stage, persons consider how to respond to the social problem. So, in other words, now there's a coming together of the groups to actually address the issue. Now, when I say coming together, I mean it they're going to come together in such a way that you start to see parents showing up at the PTA meetings or showing up at the school board, and they're bringing this issue about teaching on sex education to the school board. So you start to see two groups come together on a common issue to address this particular social problem. So you may have parents that show up and they say to the school board, hey, we want to raise the issue about contraceptives being able to be distributed, in the schools, and this is the this we have some recommendations for this, and if I want to know, I would like to know what the school board thinks about this particular issue. When you start to see a social problem move from one arena to another, then you start to see the mobilization of groups come together to actually garner the response. So again, this is your stage 3. Stage 4 says, okay, now that we've gotten people together to really begin to speak to this, now we've got to actually put a formal plan in place to really carry out how to deal with this on a long term basis. So now in stage 4, this is when you start to see curriculum developed. Now to for teachers to use in their educational classes on how to present information about contraception, about sex education, about healthy relationships, for students now to be able to actually utilize and have a skill set to be able to make some decisions so that the teen pregnancy rate can decrease, so that the STD rate can decrease. That's when you start to see a social problem in the development and implementation stage, because now it's at a place where the plan has been created, and now we're actually executing and implementing that which we've been talking about for several months. So again, Bloomers stages of the social problem analysis sort of give us an idea of how the social problems transition from one phase to another. And again, you would have to say, okay, so now we understand the stages of the social problem analysis. Now tell me a little bit about how should we understand this utilizing theories, and basically primarily sociological theories, to explain why these problems are occurring. And a theory in its basic sense is a statement about how we make sense of what we see, how we make sense of what we perceived. Okay, so basically, if we were to take a look at sociological theories, they would help us to explain why social problems occur, and then they help us to understand why things are the way they are in our society. Okay, so now let's think about this. Now, in our book, the authors actually mentioned 3 types of theories to explain social problems, and these theories are mentioned in every chapter. The first is the structural functionalist theory. The second is conflict theory, and the third is symbolic interactionist theory. Now, it's interesting with the structural functionalist theory, these theorists actually take the stance that our social institutions function for a specific purpose. So within the social institutions, we have the family. The family functions for a specific purpose. It functions to teach its children morals. It socializes its children. It nurtures the children. It helps them to be able to make wise decisions. So that family institution serves for the function of basically providing a way for its children to grow to be productive citizens of society. That's one institution. Another institution would be our educational institution, and that's basically designed for students to help transmit skills and knowledge in society, that they could also become productive members. Okay, if we were to look at our governmental system, its function is to develop laws that would help to govern the norms and sanctions in our society. If we were to look at the religious institution, it serves as a way to provide spiritual guidance and an outlet for individuals to engage in learning more about a higher power. So, if we were to take a look at that, the structural functionists would say that basically each of these institutions function for a specific purpose, but their specific purpose, all of their purposes are different, but they are interrelated. Okay, so basically, the structural functionist would also say, hey, I know the family's job is to raise children and to nurture them and to help them to understand how to make great decisions, to help them understand what it means to be productive in society. But the educational institution would come along and say, yes, but we're going to give them a skill set and a knowledge base from which to do that. The governmental system would come along and say, okay, our job, although the family and the educational system serve a purpose, we serve a purpose in helping society understand that they must follow certain rules in order to for them to fit as acceptable members of society. Okay, then the religious institution would come along and say, all right, now that you've got those, our job basically is to provide an instruction, a guidance based on understanding that there's a higher power. And so all of those are interrelated. We know that families have to send their children to school to be educated. We know that once the children get in school to be educated, then they also, as they grow, they're going to have to follow the norms in society, and they have to understand how rules work in order to abide by those things, the laws that have been set by our government. Then the religious institution, how that's related, it may be that now the children are growing up, now they must also understand that depending on their belief system, that they're going to need something else to look to outside of everything else, and that definitely is subjective in how families nurture their children, but you can see that it is interrelated. So the structural functionists really give us a sense of understanding about how each part of the society works together to achieve a common purpose. Okay, so now watch. It's interesting that structural functionalists also would state that when the norms in our society are broken and there are not specific strong consequences or sanctions for norms being broken, then there is disorganization, there's chaos in our society. And so, out of the structural functionist background, they actually help us to see that a certain structure, a certain order, and a certain framework must be in place for society to function the way it's been designed to function. Now, there's another theory that deals with social pathology, and it's under the structural functionist theory base. And it basically states that whenever there is a breakdown in our social institutions, then it is likened unto a part of our society being sick and not functioning the way it should, because in one area there is what they would call an illness, or it's also would be considered a sickness. Okay, and so what you have to understand is that if you have problems such as, let's say, the poverty or the violence or the delinquency, then whenever those problems exist, the social pathology model would say, hey, there's a social illness that's occurring here, and we're going to have to adopt a specific norm that must be implemented in order for this sickness to go away. Okay, and so what you will find there is that in our society, Structural functionists would look at social pathology and say, hey, whenever one component of our society is out of whack or it is socially ill, then the whole society now is in danger because one component is weak. If you could understand that and liken that to a physical body, if you and some of you may have experienced that, if you are persons and you work in stressful jobs, and let's say in your physical body you get a headache or you become sick, well then you cannot function well enough to work the job in society. Same way with the social pathology model. If one component, if we have a high rate of crime, if we have a high rate of poverty, if there is a high rate of juvenile delinquency, then it causes a rift in our society, and our society is not functioning the way it should. Thus, it leads it to be in a state of illness to such a degree that we in society are actually at a loss because one area in which we are built is not functioning the way it was designed to function. So that social pathology model really helps us to see that we must have norms in place, and norms must be in such a position, they must be created in such a position that they're understood, they're evident, and they're apparent, so that when things become sick in our society, people understand that the norm is there, and when they don't follow the norm, then they're going to have to suffer the sanction or the consequence. So what we're really beginning to find out really is this, is that our society from a structural functionalist point of view must implement rules and laws to such a degree, and we must continually be consistent so that each component of our society remains in good health and it functions normally and properly. Again, it's very interesting because structural functionalists, I would liken them to administrators who are very adamant about procedures and policies being followed in order for the organization to function effectively. And if you all have worked for any supervisors that are really adamant about following policy and procedure, you can liken them to having a structural functionalist theory point of view. So it's very interesting. I find it very interesting. Again, the other theory that is mentioned in our textbook is this notion of conflict theorist. And these conflict theorists, I just am really amazed because I see a lot of this in our society today, whereas based on different groups and the power and the resources they have, the conflict theorists would say groups in our society are always competing for power and resources and for status and for authority. And basically, they would also say that inequality among these groups actually breeds or fosters conflict, as well as if there are difference of values or interests among different social groups, this also creates conflict. It's kind of interesting because when I think about this theory, I often think about in our society right now, if you've done some research, and I'm sure some of you have worked for years in different professions and you've been watching the classes in our society, research tells us that we're moving into a time where there will be no middle class. There's going to be an upper class and there's going to be a lower class, but there's not going to be a middle class because of how our society is moving economically, and how you all know that we've been in an economic downturn since 2008, and we've seen the loss of jobs. We've seen people lose jobs. We've seen people lose homes and struggling to pay mortgages. And so the conflict theorists would come in and say, hey, the reason this is happening is because there's a portion of society that has, and there's a portion of society that does not have basically access to resources or access to power. And so if they don't have access to resources and power, then you're always going to have people that have and people that have not. And so it's interesting that if you take a look in our society today, and even in our government and things going on in our nation, the bills that have been passed, and even in our past presidential elections, and looking back, and then we're going into another election year, and this notion of being able to tax the upper class if they make this amount of money versus not taxing another class. Conflict theorists would say that's going on because there's inequality among the groups, and it's naturally going to cause disagreement. It's naturally going to cause a difference of opinion and conflict, because you've always got one group that's going to have access to things that the other group does not have. So it makes it very interesting. And I'm sure some of you see this in your area of work. Based on the position that you work in. If you work in a higher position, you may see, and I'm sure that there are things that you have access to that persons that work in lower positions, or their role or title is not that of one in a senior status leadership position, then naturally you're gonna have some opportunities that they don't have, and really they're not gonna have access to the opportunities that some may have, because they're not in a certain title, class, or leadership position. And again, that does naturally create what I love to call chaos and confusion, sometimes consciously and unconsciously, and which really pans out to just natural old conflict because of the group that you're in, and looking at another group that is able to obtain things that you're not able to obtain. So again, the conflict theorists help us to see the black and white, if you will. The last theory I think is pretty interesting is this symbolic interaction theory. And I've had the opportunity when I was working on my doctorate to do a lot of work on this theory. I find it very interesting, and I find it very evident in our society today. This theory basically says that as people interact and as they encounter one another, they create meaning and they utilize symbols. And basically, their meaning and symbols, the meaning and symbols that are created, are basically a result of what happens when they come together, whether that's in a professional setting, whether that's in a recreational setting, whether it's in a family, whether it's in a classroom. This Erving Goffman, and if you ever have an opportunity, I find him fascinating. He has written a book, and it was really published, I want to say it was in the 1950s. And he wrote a book that said, it was called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, Erving Goffman. And he talked about how human behavior is symbolic to that of a theatrical analogy. And he called this term dramaturgical analysis. I just find it fascinating. And he states that basically human beings play a part based on how actors and actresses play parts in a theater production. And so Goffman would say that based on your status, based on your role, based on your race, based on your gender, given if you're in a front region, and the front region, what he would refer to as the formal setting. This would be likened to the actors or actresses being on stage and playing their parts before an audience. He would say there is a certain behavior that you would have to transmit in order to leave an impression on the audience that is watching you. And so he uses this particular analogy in terms of human behavior. And he says in the front region would be likened to being on stage. So now this front region is any formal setting that a person would find themselves in. So let's say, for example, you're on your job, and let's say you're a supervisor. And there are certain expectations that the persons that work under you have of you being a supervisor, and there is a certain role you must play. And you understand that your role is to oversee their job responsibilities. Your role is to ensure that you are transmitting and explaining the policies of an organization in such a way that the people that work under you follow those to a certain extent, that it maintains order and it yields effectiveness within the organization. Goffman would say this is your front region, and in your front region, you have a certain type of conversation, you wear a certain type of clothing, and you use a certain type of voice tone in order to accomplish uh, the goals that you need to accomplish because of the role that you play as the supervisor. And he would also say, I just love this, he would say in the front region, you are playing a role to leave an impression on those that you're supervising. And in that role, you maintain a formal behavior. And your part of your formal behavior is you're very professional. You are very adequate in explaining what you need for your supervisees to accomplish in their day-to-day job functions, and you are very precise about goals and outcomes that you want to see achieved, that they must achieve working under you. That is a certain role that you play, and each time that you stand before your supervisees, you have on your professional demeanor because of your role as the supervisor. Now, that's your front region. It's the formal setting. And in the formal setting, you're transmitting a certain aura about yourself because of the audience that you are in front of. Now, he would also say in your back region, I love this, he would say this is where you're informal. This is where you take off the professionalism. This is where you get rid of the formal conversation. This is where you find yourself just sorting, letting your hair down, if you will, and just being you. And the back region would be considered when you're around your peers, when you're in your household with your spouse, or when you're with your kids. And when you're in this setting, you take off everything that you portray in the front region, and you just simply are a person that is different now and is laid back because you don't have to play a role now because you're not before that specific audience. In the back region, you can simply say whatever you need to say and not feel that it's going to be taken in the wrong way, because the back region, you're not in your costume, if you will, and you don't have to leave an impression because the persons in your back region really understand who you are, and they understand that to them you're just simply mom, dad, you're simply a sister or brother, you're simply a friend, and you can just really be very informal. That's your back region, Goffman was saying. He would liken that to being backstage, where you simply can just be your old simple self, if you will. Now, what I find interesting about this as it relates to social problems is that you create meaning based on the role that you play. You create meaning based on how you interpret what your family says, and how you interpret what those that work under you say, and how you interact with both those groups. So we know in your household, there's meaning created through dialogue, there's meaning created through how you sit at the dinner table, and your nonverbals are portrayed before your family. There's meaning in there. There's certain gestures that your family understand that the persons in your front region that are your supervisees wouldn't understand because they don't know you in that light. Okay. So what's interesting is that when you think about this in terms of social problems, Goffman would simply say that problems are born out of meaning that might be understood differently depending on whether you're in the front region or in the back region. Okay. And it's very interesting. So if you were to think about, let's take the social problem, let's say in the front region on your job there, a problem, a communication problem arises. And this communication problem is one of oral communication, in that you may have stated something and your supervisees interpreted it different from what you meant. Okay. So Goffman would say the social problem has risen out of the groups not coming to agreement on what meaning is created based on the communication that's being transmitted. Okay. So if you think about this, it really causes you to think about how naturally social problems, it could be a social problem of the communication, miscommunication rather, that is arisen just out of common day interaction. And you see this on your job, I'm sure. You say one thing in a meeting, it's taken a different way. Could be something said that some of your supervisees, and they went back and sent an email back to you, and based on this is what we got. Then you sent another email back and you may have said, now that's not what I meant, this is what I meant. So naturally Goffman would say, wow, this meaning has arisen simply because there was not an agreed upon uh, idea of what was meant when this thing or this information was communicated. In your family, um, you could be sitting around the dinner table in your back region, and you may make a gesture to your wife or to your husband at the dinner table, and based on your children, they may interpret the gesture to mean one thing because they're looking at the gesture from a child's point of view to the mom or dad, but your gesture was made to the spouse based on your relationship with the spouse. But the children that's at the dinner table could have looked at that and interpreted a totally different way. So what Goffman would say is your nonverbals, the things that you don't say, also create meaning, and it could cause a problem to arise in terms of how the children view you all at the dinner table. So you may have to have some conversation about what you meant when you did this. Okay, so it becomes very interesting. We talk about social problems that arise in our community, but we never think about social problems that could arise within a family. And so as we progress this semester, I want to challenge you all not to just think on the macro level, because we're definitely going to think about that, but I want you to think about some social problems that may arise within your own friendship circles, your own household, that you may not have never even considered to be an issue. Okay, so I need you to broaden your thinking outside of the drug abuse, outside of alcohol abuse, outside of teen pregnancy. And I also want you to take a look at some things that are actually emerging in your back region. So as we go along this semester, we're going to continue to utilize these three theories to actually examine and analyze why social problems occur. And as many of you stated in your blogs, you were very adamant in letting us know that they develop out of belief systems, they develop out of values, they develop out of experiences. They develop out of what the media would say, and we've not even jumped into that. We're going to jump into that later in one of our other lectures. But I definitely want to challenge you to begin to think in the front region, as we talked about, and in the back region. And what we're hoping to do this semester is, if you looked at the syllabus, I'm hoping to be able to help us see how our individual behavior in the back region may also contribute to social problems in the front region. And if you continue to read the text, you would have seen that one of the things that we're dealing with this week is utilizing our social imagination to understand how different things impact the health of our society. So what I'm hoping that you all will begin to do is to utilize your sociological imagination. What the book refers to understanding how your private troubles relate to public issues. So, what I'm hoping to do is to have you all see how the things that emerge in your back region relate to the things in the front region. And so, the front region, if we take it up another level, is not only where you work, the front region is our society, the front region is our nation, but the back region is basically where we're just being ourselves, whether that's with family, whether that's in our professional circles, our colleagues, our friends. And I want us to take an opportunity to see how do these two regions merge together and create social conditions that end up being social problems that we are really becoming adamant about addressing in our society today. So again, I hope you've enjoyed this lecture. Hope it's broadened your perspective of certain things. I hope you've got an understanding of the things that we've mentioned today, and I am hoping that you will continue to think about how our individual behavior contributes to our community behavior in terms of why social problems exist. So, again, have a great day. I will be in contact with you all this week. I hope that you comment on this lecture. Let me know what you think. We will talk more about this. Give me a call. Let's chat. And again, I am so looking forward to working with you all this semester. Have a great day.